Everybody, welcome to the podcast. Today, I want to sort of cover a topic that I think a lot of people might think they can't do much about. It's a topic that a lot of people are very interested in, though. I read a book about this it was about 7 or 8 years ago um, about human intelligence. There's been a decline in human intelligence, which a lot of people tell me is very obvious, right? Especially during the current times. You see people acting certain ways, coming to certain conclusions, behaving different ways. Obviously, social media hasn't helped that. It's recording some of the most bizarre activities I've ever seen humans do. I used to watch what was it called, Stupid Human Tricks with David Letterman years ago, and that was fun. Of course, social media, YouTube has brought that to an all-time high. We could watch fails. We could watch people doing things you're thinking that just is sad and really kind of dumb. But yeah, they've actually have been able to measure over the last, I think it's 4 decades, people are losing IQ points. Humans are getting dumber. And one of the things I wanted to point out, and I think was interesting years ago, I was reading an article about the intelligence of a caveman, because we tend to, talk about caveman as not being very bright, because he probably grunted a lot and, chased things around with a stick. But imagine surviving in an environment that was designed where you're in the middle of the food chain, right? You got the saber-toothed tiger I always talk about trying to eat you. You got frozen icy cliffs you can slip off of. Every day was a massive challenge for survival. I don't think caveman lived that long. Constantly the environment, neighboring tribes, infection, bacteria, the large and the small things, from the tigers to the bacteria, we're trying to take them out for dinner. And she survived in this environment. So it's really ridiculous to think that caveman wasn't very bright. Crafting tools and surviving like that had to be very difficult. And as we know, when you work something, it gets stronger, whether that's your muscles, your brain, it gets stronger. Resistance makes, something become and adapt. And that's something that maybe isn't happening today. But by the end of the 70s, they were able to record this drop in IQ. And it's 7 points per generation we're losing. People have said, it could be a lot of different things. Environmental toxins, maybe we're building up metals in our brain. The amount of pharmaceuticals we're ingesting, from, anxiety medication, depression medication, to the number of different shots kids are getting, to all the pain medication, the addictions, who knows? Processed food, right? The chemicals in there. We look at the list of oddities inside there. No one knows what half these things do. We'll say, well, it's a preservative and it's a derivative of this. Well, that's all nice, but what is it really doing? Where is it sticking? Is it sticking in our brain? Is it destroying our liver? We have issues there. They're finding that kids read less than they used to and play more games. Now, we'll talk about games in a second, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that computer games are bad, because some of them actually work certain parts of the brain that actually make you more intelligent. But versus reading, there might be a good argument there over which one is going to cause what part of the brain to be better, and what the global effect of enhancing the brain is with a well-crafted computer game versus a good old-fashioned book. Dependence on electronic devices is another potential thing that might be decreasing our intelligence. I was in a room the other day talking about a movie, and I couldn't remember the main actor in it, and it was driving me nuts. And I thought, and the patient grabbed their phone and looked it up, and there it was. But at least we tried. We didn't want to grab our phone. We wanted to be able to do it. We're both thinking, let's use our brains here for a minute, see if we can grab who that is out of our, neural processor up there in our head. But it took a while. We never got it and used the phone, but at least we tried, right? We used our brain. And they're saying that's one of the things we can do about that. And number 5 is coming up is, a lack of exercise and obesity. We know that stillness does not oxygenate the body, and oxygen to the brain is important. Anyone that's ever lost oxygen to their brain, whether it be by a stroke or by being too winded, knows that they start getting a little fuzzy. So imagine lightly fuzzy over 20 years, what that can do to somebody's brain. So I want to start out by just getting into sort of 8 things you can do to improve cognition, cognitive function, intelligence. And we just touched on one we'll start with, and that's exercise. If you've watched this channel at all, you know that I'm a big advocate of it. I don't really take many excuses from people that they don't move enough. I coax people into using everything from home exercise devices to eye exercises. I'm convinced from looking at the 165,000 years that we've been on this planet that we were extremely physical, and that was tied into health in a way that right now people tend not to do. I have in my practice overdone and underdone physical specimens walking in every day, right? People that are trying to win a CrossFit championship, and the next guy's, just trying to, figure out how he can make it up the stairs. So I try to coach them into the right direction, some normality, and exercise is important. In 2014, they came up with a study in comprehensive psychology where they performed brain images on people at rest and at exercise. And, you can imagine that blood is being pushed into the brain when we exercise. Our pressure goes up a little bit, our heart rate goes up a lot. We're breathing at a higher rate. So there's nothing real special about that. But they wanted to look at where does it go in the brain? It turns out it goes to areas that we're using, of course. We're moving our arms and legs. The part of our brain that's called the motor cortex is going to be activated and be able to show up on there. But what they didn't expect and what they were hoping to find, and they did find, was that some of the areas of higher processing were actually being stimulated as well. And it wasn't something that people were actually necessarily using to do the exercise. It wasn't even a complicated series of movements, but they were pushing blood to areas that made them, in a sense, smarter and improve their memory. And I thought, well, there it is, right? We have images now back in 2014 that prove that. They also found that when they looked at neuroplasticity, or the concept where we can alter our DNA, that was also happening with exercises. We were stimulating a brain in a way without even thinking, just through exercise, laying down new pathways and altering the DNA of our neurology, which is, pretty cutting edge, pretty exciting. There's a lot of stuff on neuroplasticity and epigenetics that I talked about earlier, but those are two terms you should get familiar with. But even more interesting, they found that certain exercises improved certain parts of the brain. Now, if you want to improve your memory, sprints were the best things. So doing something at the high end of aerobics, and it doesn't have to be running as fast as you can. It could be pedaling on a bike really fast, swim really hard, but kind of like an interval thing where you're really, really pushing your upper limit. And of course, consult the doctor before you jump into doing this stuff if you're not too familiar with it. We don't want somebody hurting themselves. So, always check with that. But you want to make sure that you're at the high end of aerobics to improve memory. For decision making, basically sweating. They found that exercises that detoxified you and help you relax. So exercises that make you sweat, hot environments, whether it be hot yoga or a sauna, but doing some kind of exercise that you're actually making sure you're perspiring, where you're using the skin. For focus, it was resistance training. So resistance training, for people that don't use that term, is lifting heavy weight. So it doesn't have to be heavy, but it's lifting weight for sure. That seemed to improve people's ability to simply focus. Mental processing, the ability to use different parts of the brain and coordinate them. Yoga was the best for that. And you can imagine, right? You're in a relaxed state, but you're using and straining the body and deep breathing. You actually process more complex concepts in your head, which is certainly a measurement of intelligence. And for mental endurance, a lot of times we lose our intellect as the day goes by. People are grabbing energy drinks, caffeinated beverages, falling asleep in their chair after lunch, that kind of thing. Endurance exercises improve that. So if you want brain endurance, you need body endurance, because to some degree it's the same kind of thing. So when we're doing exercises, you take the weakest part of your brain. If you think, God, my memory's terrible, if you're going to sprint, I can't make a decision to save my life, start sweating. If you can't seem to focus on anything, you start doing resistance training. If you can't process things, you just can't keep up, you can't seem to calculate properly, yoga. And if you want a brain that's going to endure the day and be just as energetic at 6:30 as it was at 6:30 in the morning, endurance exercises, okay? Okay, that's number one. Number two, games and puzzles. The brain needs to be stimulated. And they've used the analogy that the brain is a muscle, and we don't use it, it gets weak. I was talking about somebody with the immune system the other day, and the concept of herd immunity, of course, as well as the hygiene hypothesis and all this other stuff. And it really was an eye-opener for this individual, because there's a person that's basically hiding from every bacteria and virus in the world. And I said, you're going to get weak if you don't exercise that immune system. And there's certain things we obviously don't want to introduce into our bodies. I wouldn't want to get Ebola or rabies. But at the same time, if you sterilize your environment, your immune system doesn't have anything to do, and it tends to attack yourself. And then you have an autoimmune disease, and then you're really in trouble. So challenging the brain and challenging different parts of us is fun. I'm not a big puzzle person per se, the actual puzzle, but I do like to solve problems and fix things and do things that are complex. I like to challenge myself in those ways. But the game itself, they did a study simply on Tetris, old-fashioned computer game where you have the little shapes are coming down. You got to turn them and fit them in. I don't know if the young people out there even know what that is, but we used to play that back in the Stone Ages. And that was able to improve brain function. So a simple game like that. So get involved in doing stuff that's challenging and different in a game scenario. Computer games do fit into there. If you're just playing killing zombies, obviously you can imagine that doesn't really do much. But if you're solving more complex issues, my daughter, who's turned out to be very bright for probably a lot of reasons, we used to play 3D Dinosaur Adventure from Scholastic. Amazing game. It used to challenge her and have fun at the same time. And in the end, you got to hatch baby dinosaurs, which you can imagine how an 8-year-old feels about that. She was just thrilled to hatch little baby dinosaurs. But you had to earn the eggs and the hatching crystals by playing the game. 3D Dinosaur Adventure. Simple as a CD back then. I'm sure you could find it in other ways as well. So that's number 2, games puzzle. Number 3, stop using your cell phone. I mentioned earlier, a patient and I struggled to use our actual brains instead of the one in our hand to find out who that actor was we couldn't bring to mind. So when you're faced with something and you want to look it up on your phone, spend a little bit of time trying to figure it out. The brain is hooked up that it's hooked up in connections. So if I'm trying to think of an actor, I might want to name all the movies, maybe even out loud, that I think that person's in. Then all of a sudden, one of those movies will be connected to that person's name, and it'll pop up. And I've just reawoken a neural pathway, rebuilt and restructured one that was getting a little rusty. So use devices less is simply what they're saying. Number 4, meditation and mindfulness. Now, those two terms are getting interchangeable right now, the mindfulness idea, but basically that calming state where we're spending a little bit of time with deep breath and sort of like zoning out. Some people are, natural daydreamers, and it's easy for them to get into a meditative state. Other people, it's an actual job. I've sent people with anxiety to meditation classes. And wow, they came back either majorly altered in a good way, or they just blew up because they couldn't sit that still. But doing some basic meditation, start with something really simple. I used to just close my eyes and just count backwards from 50 and try to get all the way there without too many thoughts coming in my head. It's really not that difficult to do, but there's so many great YouTube videos on meditation, singing bowls, sounds, music that'll get you there. But that's another thing that's going to give the mind sort of a rest. We want to work it and we want to rest it. Just like a muscle, we work with weights and then we go to bed and we sleep and it repairs itself and it's stronger in the morning. So we also need that shutting off. And sometimes sleep, we're actually still dreaming and our brain is still moving. So meditation has a different brain wave. You can look in the alpha theta wave of the brain when it's in different states of sort of consciousness. Number 5, starve the brain. Now, I thought this was interesting. I got into this with a couple of other friends of mine that are into personal training about intermittent fasting. Now, I know a fair amount of people that do this. I've never been a big intermittent faster, but I've done it mildly. I've done outright fasts, but the idea of not eating for about 16 hours. So you don't eat too close to bed, and then you wake up in the morning and you blow off breakfast, and then you eat later in the day. So you just measure out about 16 hours, including your sleep time to make it easier, and you don't eat. So what they're found is that the brain gets a little faster and smarter. And think how this would be tied into survival. If you were hungry, I think you'd have to be maybe you're hungry because you're not too smart yet, and then you're going to get smarter and find food, right? Because that wasn't easy. So for thousands of years, we were hungry and we got a little more energy and we decided to go out and get food. Now there's a point, and if you're diabetic, obviously you don't do this kind of stuff, but there's a point where you get so hungry, then obviously you become a little bit fuzzy. That isn't good, but that's why it's intermittent fasting, and we're not telling you to fast for 7 days. We're telling you to, for 16 hours. It allows the bloodstream to get very cleaned up. All the glucose and other nutrients that are floating in your blood, that you can bring them down to a reasonable level. And that it gives you mind clarity, and they found that the brain was actually quicker rebuilding itself during intermittent fasting. I did have a patient with a significant car accident that tried this and really felt it helped her cognitively. She had a lot of different things in her body that were damaged, disc herniations and nerve pressure in her arms and her legs, but her cognitive ability was really affected at first. And I told her about this, and she did it very safely and quietly and slowly, and said she's really got into it, and she's become an intermittent faster now. So yeah, she's used it for a lot of different ways. Number 6, keeping a journal. Now, when we write and we read and we speak, we're using different parts of our brain. That's why conversation and listening are important. That's different parts, as well as being able to write. And it's important that when you write your journal, you may want to do it a couple of different ways. It doesn't have to be real positive. You know how country music is. You can get it out and say what you want, or you can write down stuff that's very empowering. That isn't really what I'm talking about right now. What I'm really talking about is just simply organizing your thoughts, getting them on paper. A journal, a diary, you can give it all different names, but what it is the ability to write down what you're thinking, and then when you read it, it goes back in the other way. So you're spitting it out and then you're taking it in. And when you use those two pathways of out and in, you process the brain and you reorganize the way you think. And when you have more ordered thoughts, your brain works a lot better than when there's scattered thoughts. Scattered thoughts exhaust you because of the anxiety they create. So writing a journal every night is one great idea. Number 7 of the 8 is learning a new skill. When we learn something new, we have to use different parts of our brain. We have to lay down new neural pathways. And of course, that's tiring and it's difficult. But, one of the quotes I heard recently is, thinking is hard work. That's why so few people do it. And I thought that was pretty funny, but I think that's really the case, especially in the last year or two. A lot of people just seem to not be able to think properly. And I think because it's hard work, if you're anxiety ridden, you might be already exhausted. So you want someone to do the thinking for you. It's one thing to learn something. It's another thing to analyze. It's another thing just to have someone think for you. I never really enjoyed someone doing the thinking for me because anytime that happened in my personal life, it didn't really work out for me. So I like to think for myself, and I encourage everybody to do that. I'm here to give you some ideas to run with. I'm not trying to think for you in these podcasts, right? But I want to give you stuff, and then you go look it up and finish the thinking yourself. I just want to introduce you to stuff and, pick through the thousands and hours of volumes of stuff that, and go with sources that I can trust for everybody listening. But when you learn a new skill, you're going to build new neural pathways. A neural pathway is simple. It's any series of events that link one to the other. Driving a car, playing an instrument, are all parts of new neural pathways. So when I first get in a car, the first time I ever did it, I was like, okay, gas, brake, steering, blinker, rear view mirror. And then all of a sudden, you're driving a couple of years and you don't even realize you just drove home. You use all those things, but they're all in a very familiar neural pathway. It becomes reflexive. It's a learned behavior. Once you learn stuff, that brain really doesn't work so hard anymore. New things make it work harder. So challenge yourself with new ideas, whether it's, like we said before, board games, but it can be just anything. Build a birdhouse, learn how to use a saw. It doesn't matter. Something new, something interesting. Introduce that into your day, or at least once a week. Learn something new, or build on a skill you already have. That's going to stimulate the brain. And number 8, I just kind of said it a second ago, play an instrument. I remember going to one of my daughter's band recitals, and the teacher got up and talked about how funding might be cut to schools, and that funding is crucial, in that learning and playing instruments and having kids play instruments is so important. And he was talking about how many parts of the brain have to be used to play an instrument, right? Because you're listening, so the ears are going. You're doing something physical to play that instrument, and you're thinking about how you're doing it. So you're coordinating your physical body and your mind, and the majority of your senses are being stimulated. And that type of neural processing, that type of cognitive stimulation creates neural pathways and overall cognitive use. So when you're using a good part of the brain at the same time, it's another way of becoming more intelligent because you found ways of using more gray matter and coordinating all those things together. Okay? So in review real quick, we want to exercise. We want to play games and puzzles. We want to stop using our cell phones to think for us. We want to do some meditation and mindfulness. We want to potentially get involved in some intermittent fasting, like starve the brain. Make sure you're capable of doing that physically. Diabetics and such, you don't want to do that kind of thing. Keeping a journal, so we're writing our thoughts down, learning new skills, and playing an instrument. And it's never too late to do that. So those are the 8. Other thing I want to talk about is brain balance. I think we made a YouTube video, or it might be in our class, 21 Days to Optimum Health. That's on my ChristopherUniversity.com university that I put together. But brain balance, real quickly, is the ability to use both sides of the brain, right? So, just like it sounds. You think about it, if you ever know much of anatomy, you have your left and a right brain. And people will talk about how to assign those different behaviors. The left brain is good at this, the right brain is good at that, creative, logical, all that kind of stuff. And there is some correlation there. You look at how left-handed people are a little different. They tend to have a little bit of different skills than right-handed people. Of course, it doesn't always fit because that's how science is. But they're connected together, the left and right, by a tissue, a brain tissue, a nervous tissue called the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is the bridge. So if I look at a stool, I know it's a stool, so I can recognize it. And then if I wanted to tell somebody that's a stool, I have to use the other side of the brain. So one side recognizes it, the other side names it. So if you're ever tired, you may have done this. You may have said, hand me the, and you can't believe you can't come up with the word, and it's pen. And the reason you're doing that is the corpus callosum is not able to connect your recognition of that pen to the word pen. And that happens with age, it happens with fatigue, it happens with poor nutrition, lack of exercise, all the stuff we mentioned before. So we want to exercise that, and we exercise that by doing things that are physical as well. We talked about actual physical exercise, its effect on the brain, but right now I want to talk about how we can do actual things with our body that are not real complicated. They're certainly not exercise, but they're physical. And it involves crossing the midline of your body. It's confusing. When I put my hand up like this, it is confusing for me to do that to the brain a little bit, because it's like, what's the hand doing on the other side? It's a lot easier to do this than it would be to do this, because I'm crossing the midline. So as soon as we cross a midline or change the activities from one hand to another, it's a little more challenging. One of the things that I go over with people all the time is a simple hand sort of trick that helps you process and force that corpus callosum, that middle tissue, to coordinate. And it's simple as this. So you can put your hands together like this. You can do this with me if you try. It's going to seem really impossible at first, but it gets easy after you do it. I might mess it up because I haven't done it in a while. So you clap. You come out of the clap with bull horns and peace sign. And then you clap and you switch to peace sign, bull horns, and then peace sign, bull horns the other way. So every time you're doing it, you're switching to the other side. Hopefully I did that right. I'm really paying attention. So it's that, and then you click, and it's that, okay? And if you try that right now, you're going to see that that's very difficult. Some people get a little quicker than others, of course, but that is challenging your brain. I'm only able to do it at the rate I'm doing that right now is because I've done it a lot in the past and shown it to a lot of people. So the peace sign and bullhorns, switching back and forth, you want to do it at a pace where you're doing 1 every 2 seconds. When you can do 10 of those in a row, 1 every 2 seconds without making a mistake, you're kind of there. You've kind of really broke free and pushed a lot of neural electro activity through that corpus callosum to wake it up to get both sides of the brain going. The other one is to take your hands and on this side draw a triangle and on this side draw a square at the same time. So let's see if I can get it. You're going to go on an angle here. This one's coming straight down. They're both going across. This one's coming on an angle to make the triangle, and this one's coming along making a square. And then you switch and you say, okay, I'm going to do triangle over here, and I'm going to make a square on my other side. So I'm making a square, and then I'm making a triangle, right? So each hand is doing it a little differently. So square, triangle, and then triangle, square, switching them back and forth. It's one of the other ways of doing it. And the third thing, to give you too many here, there's a bunch of these, is to do jump lunges. if you're physically capable of that, you jump in the air and you lunge a little bit. So you put one foot out, one foot back, and then you jump and you put the other foot back and the other foot forward. And when you jump back and forth like that, you're challenging your body in a coordinated pattern. And if you, at the same time as you're doing that, box to the opposite side. So you're jump lunging and you're boxing to the opposite side. These are exercises you see personal trainers do. I work out sometimes at Red Level Boxing, and they have all kinds of different moves like that to throw different punches. And it can be a little challenging because they'll yell out which punch to throw really fast, and you're trying to throw all these punches, but and they cross the midline. And that's one of the things that is really good about that kind of, a lot of aerobic exercises, dance, do a lot of stuff like that. But if you're kind of sedentary because maybe you have different orthopedic issues, we really can't do a lot. You can probably do the peace sign and bullhorns. You certainly can do a lot of the other activities we went over today. So that's brain balance. And last topic to go over would be different nutrients we can take. There are a load of different things on the market to stimulate your brain. Some of them are pretty bizarre. Some of them you know very well. And maybe you haven't heard that they do much because they just are real common substances. But the word today for, if we're going to have a word to know, is nootropic, which is nootropic. What that word means is sort of smart substances, whether it be medications or supplements or vitamins, pills, different things you can ingest that are somewhat stimulating to our cognitive abilities. And the first one you might know about, omega-3 fish oils. Now, omega-3s are a particular fat. It's the good fat. We used to think fats were bad back in the 70s and 80s, and they realized that there were good and bad versions of them. And we're finding that out about carbohydrates and proteins as well. But for now, omega-3 fish oil, which anything in the omega-3 department fits that. Coconut oil fits in there, flax oil, borage oil, krill oil, the oils that, and you can figure that out, any of the omega-3s. What fats do is they basically help the brain process mood, and they reduce inflammation. Swelling will actually cause you to be cognitively impaired. So in other words, if your whole body is injured or you're eating foods that cause inflammation in when your joints hurt, your brain is also not functioning optimally, because the inflammatory chemistry that affects your joints affects your heart, your lungs, and your brain. And fish oils is a really great, omega-3 fats found in fish oil is a really great anti-inflammatory. Phosphatidylserine is another one it's abbreviated as PS, and I'll spell that for you. It's PHOSPHATIDYLSERINE. That is in a sense a stimulus. It is really worked with ADHD kids. They've given that. You can buy that as a supplement. It's found in really healthy diets in multiple foods. If you're eating a lot of green leafy vegetables, you're getting some of that. It's found in some meats. But you're really, if you want to get it's a fat soluble amino acid. It falls into that category. It's part of, it helps build neural tissue. So it decreases the decline of the breakdown. As you know, as we age, we lose some cognitive abilities, and this is one of the nutrients that slows that process down. So it's like almost like an anti-aging nutrient. Number 3 is alpha GPC. It's a choline source. Now remember choline, 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 is probably one of the best supplements you can put in the brain in general. There's a lot of different sources of choline. You can look that up. But alpha GPC is one of the better ones. It sometimes can be a little pricey, but it's a really great way, once again, to slow the cognitive decline. Choline's it reduces some of the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. So, I mean, this has been researched. It isn't something you're just going to run into some crazy health food store and it's all silly stuff. This is, pretty heavily researched as well. Another one, caffeine. You've got to love that one. Yeah, some people, this is their lifeblood. I know Dr. Fred Cleary, if it wasn't for caffeine, I think he'd just be on the floor mumbling. That's one of his favorite things when we were growing up. But it is another brain stimulus. It's been proven to, sharpen memory and increase oxygen uptake in the brain. So, and everything is about dosage. We wouldn't want to drink a pot of coffee, but up to 2 to 3 cups a day of caffeine, actually in most people, is digested fairly well. right? You'll know if you're getting edgy and short-tempered, you probably have a little too much caffeine in you, or you're simply not rested enough and you're using caffeine to make up for that and causing that imbalance. Another one is acetyl L-carnitine. Now, L-carnitine is another amino acid. It's found in a lot of healthy foods. It increases the blood flow to the brain. So one of the things that exercise does, we mentioned earlier, is increase blood supply to the brain. The amino acid L-carnitine or acetyl L-carnitine, you can buy that as a supplement. Good protein sources carry this, right? So if you're eating a lot of decent high protein diet, you're going to get a fair amount of this. You might want to bring it to the next level through a supplement. So there's a couple more. Ginkgo biloba. Ginkgo is probably one of the oldest remedies for memory. It's been in Chinese medicine forever. There's Korean sources. There's different sources of it. Ginkgo can give you the mental boost, they say. Ginkgo is often associated with being able to stop the decline, and it's also been associated with Alzheimer's disease, like decreasing the effects of Alzheimer's. So I always recommend that for patients with that. Another one is ginseng, right? Ginseng is basically a mild aphrodisiac. It's done things to stimulate the general health of patients. So that I won't go on about that. That's that's well known. Turmeric or turmeric, depending how you want to pronounce that, and curcumin. Now they're related. If you take turmeric and you cook it with black pepper, heat it up, the curcumin comes out. Not to be confused with cumin. This is curcumin or curcumin. Both of these seem to have multiple pronunciations. They are, that's an East Indian dish that's been going on forever. When you're eating curried chicken or a curried dish, that's what you're getting. That gives it that yellow gold look and flavor. I really love the taste of this. It's not hot. A lot of people think of East Indian food, they think of hot. This is not one of the hot spices in there. If you haven't used it, you can buy it in big jars of it. I actually get it from a local supermarket. They have organic versions of it and healthier versions of it. And I cook with it all the time. I sprinkle it right on salads. But when you heat it up, you're going to get the active ingredient that is the anti-inflammatory agent. This works on joints, and it works on the general swelling that can get in the way and sort of affect our brains. So we want to cook and eat and potentially supplement with turmeric or curcumin. Another one is MCT oil, medium chain triglycerides. Now you'll know if you get your blood work done that the rate and the amount of triglycerides circulating in your blood dictates kind of how much you're eating versus exercising. So if you have a mediocre diet and an incredible exercise program, your triglycerides will probably be low. But if you have a great diet and a great exercise program, your triglycerides are most likely going to be low. There's always genetics, but that's one of the things. So you want low triglycerides in your blood. And one of the ways of doing that is to actually take healthy triglycerides. Now, so this is a medium chain triglyceride, so it's a healthy fat. In a sense, it's found in a lot of different foods, but it's considered, one of the ways your body works with ketone energy. So if you look at some of the ketosis diets, this is involved in that. But medium chain triglycerides are something that the oil is something that I recommend for patients, over the years. So those are some of the things we can do to get a little more intelligent, right? We got to work the brain, but we also have to feed it, and we also have to starve it, right? I mean, we can't just fill our blood with food constantly and expect that to be normal and natural and healthy. There's times where we want to do the intermittent fasting I mentioned. Always check with your doctor about that one, see if you have the blood sugar ability to do that. The functioning pancreas to be able to pull that off. But so today we want to make sure that you know that there are things you can do, that we are declining in intelligence, and that obviously is not good. And we want to be able to stop that. We're going to look at all the factors that might be part of that. So be aware that a lot of the behaviors you're doing aren't just affecting your energy levels, they're actually affecting your ability to think. It's not just affecting your waistline, it's your ability to function properly and in old age still have your wits about you. A lot of people that are older, you look at people that are in their 90s, some of my patients, and you think, well, how is this person so bright and so fast? A lot of times it's they've kept busy. And what does that mean? They feel useful. What does that mean? Well, they're physically active and they're mentally active. So we kind of know all that, but let's take a look and see, can we do specific things? It's one thing to just run around in circles. It's another thing to have an organized program like I'm putting before you today. So like I say, if you like this content, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to go on the university, see more things, ChristopherUniversity.com. We have all kinds of blogs, and recipes. All these podcasts are on there, as well as other content. We have a class called 28 Days to Optimum Health. You can check that out as well. And thanks for joining me today. Take care.